50 podcast, where we talk about the hard truth about today's current events.
Welcome to the Signal 50 podcast for Wednesday, June 9th, 2021. I don't know about anybody else, but summer has certainly arrived. And can you believe it's June 9th already? Bravo. How are you this evening, sir?
I'm doing fine, sir. Thanks. You're sounding very good on this end. I want you to know. Sounds very professional. I want you to know.
Well, I appreciate that. Not too bad. Not too bad for a couple of guys who started in September. And and we had our first show up by Sunday night with stuff we bought out of Staples. Not too bad. But we're coming right along. I hope everyone's having as much fun as we are listening to us as we are making the content for you. We just have a great time getting together and doing this kind of stuff. So without a whole lot more going on, there's a lot to talk about tonight. In case anybody hasn't noticed, the news cycle is just moving a million miles an hour. And what we're here to do is to break things down for you and give you some of the stories that you may or may not have seen that are out there, and to give you a little bit of our opinion on them. And let you decide for yourself. So everybody out there, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I know everybody's time is short, so we're going to try to keep it as brief as possible, but we're going to try to come to you about 2 or 3 times a week now. So we're going to try to do 3 shows a week, 2 short shows and 1 long show. And we hope you enjoy the format. So anyhow, without further ado, here's what we're going to talk about tonight. You know, there's a whole lot of discussion about COVID. Obviously, you know, that is the topic of the last year and some months. We have talked about it a number of times, and there's a whole lot of revelations coming out about that, and a lot of opinion, a lot of things that we've already previously talked about that have really been vindicated. I would guess. Unfortunately, these are things we don't want to be right about. But unfortunately are. We're going to be talking about that, some of the origins or some of the theories behind where COVID started. We want to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
And this all revolves around the politics surrounding some of these events, statements, and happenings along with the coronavirus, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about, it's all politics, unfortunately. The politics around a pandemic, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yep.
So we're going to talk a little bit about hydroxychloroquine and how that saga evolved. And finally, we're going to break away from that a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about something that happened in Loudoun County, Virginia recently. That's more of the, culture war type discussion that we should be having. And we're going to get into that as our last topic tonight. So without further ado, let's break into the first story here. This is from the Epoch Times. It's an opinion piece from Dinesh D'Souza wrote this. And it goes to discuss, how everything was ginned up surrounding everything that was being said about the origin story of COVID, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how the money got spread around. And this is a Dinesh D'Souza piece. This is an opinion piece, and you can pick and choose out of here. So we're just reporting basically on what Dinesh said for everybody that's listening out there. Mm-hmm. These aren't our words; these are his. So go ahead.
But also, just so you're aware, Dinesh D'Souza is a very well-read, very well-researched person who does a lot when it comes to this. Actually, if you want to do that, Bravo, Alpha, I don't have in front of me that one. I had the other one.
Oh, okay. Well, that's no problem. So, okay. So the opinion piece that Dinesh D'Souza wrote is basically the story goes to break down the notion that this virus started from an animal and crossed the human boundary, and it arose naturally from a meat market in Wuhan. And Dinesh D'Souza goes to point out that he feels strongly that that is absolutely a hoax.
I happen to agree with him.
Well, I happen to agree with him as well, and of all places, He goes on to talk in this article about an article in a magazine that everybody's probably heard of at one point or another, Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair it's a culture and trends magazine. It's not really noted for a serious journalistic bent. And there's a gal that wrote the article. Her name is Catherine Eben. It's an in-depth article that she wrote about, and it's completely researched. And this is what Dinesh is leaning on in his opinion piece. And it's all very believable, and it's very well-researched article. I actually did read it. It's very in-depth. It's written like a murder mystery, like a spy novel, right?
Yep.
You know, so what they're going on to talk about is, how did a scientific consensus that SARS-CoV-2 came from the Wuhan meat market? Okay, right? Does anybody remember about a group letter that was signed by quote unquote leading virologists?
Oh, I remember that one. Yes.
Right.
They were
yes.
adamant about what this was. You know, this crossed over. There's all. We'll get into this in a second. But yes, I do remember that.
Right. And the letter was published in a publication called The Lancet, which is a very well thought of medical journal, right?
Correct. Well, it used to be, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, it used to be. The article, it really dismissed the theories that suggested that SARS-CoV-2, it may have come from the Wuhan lab as a conspiracy theory. You know, they were calling everything that anybody that said that it came from the Wuhan lab conspiracy theorists, and that the scientific community,
you're loony, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. You know, spreading their narrative on this, and that any thought or notion that this came from a lab in Wuhan, China, was flatly rejected by the scientific community. Well, the Lancet statement, okay, this article, it was used to convince the media around the world and to rally support to revile public figures like Tom Cotton. Remember Tom Cotton? Everybody thought he was crazy, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was the first one to start banging the drum about it and talking about it, and the senators around him were basically making fun of him in the middle of the Senate floor.
Right.
You know.
Right. And they dubbed him a kook for raising the possibility of the debunked and discredited theory from these noted virologists that published a story in the Lancet, right?
Yep.
Now, we all understand the impact of digital media. We all understand the power, and it is power, of digital media. Facebook, YouTube, ScrewTube, Twitter, Facebook, ScrewTube, Twitter. You know, okay, so they coordinated together, according to Dinesh and the article from Vanity Fair, right? To impose a strict regime of restriction and banning and shadow banning and even deplatforming users who are sharing such what they would call misinformation. And they relied on their recommendations of their so-called fact checkers, right? Facebook took down millions or even tens of millions of posts supposedly discussing that SARS might have leaked from a lab. And
that's right.
That's
it was almost like they were
the
scrubbing. Yeah, they sent out these bots, and they were looking for the algorithms were looking for certain words like, lab release, or, weaponized, or, we didn't even, this gain of function term was not even heard of until, I would say, almost this month. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So the article from Vanity Fair goes on a little bit to go ahead and shows the behind the curtain mechanism for how the Lancet statement was produced. Okay. According to the Vanity Fair article now, right? It was organized by a zoologist named Peter Daszak. Remember that name.
Remember
Peter.
I think he's
Daszak.
the boss for Fauci, isn't he? Isn't he the boss of Fauci?
No, he's not the boss for Fauci. He
Okay.
runs the
There's
Eco
someone
Health
else that's a boss.
Alliance. He's involved with the
thank you.
Eco Health Alliance. Okay, so
Yep.
this guy, Peter Daszak, is involved in the U.S. government-funded research aimed at the making of deadly viruses in labs. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Daszak is head of the group called the Eco Health Alliance, and he's worked directly with China's Wuhan laboratories to research coronaviruses and potentially make them more contagious and more lethal, according to the article. Right. So
Correct.
this is not wholesome stuff, right? This is very much contrary to what we've been told, even by Fauci himself, right?
Correct.
Okay. The research of gain of function stuff, it's incredibly dangerous, right?
Sure. You're looking to make a virus more virulent or catchy, more dangerous that could kill you.
Right.
Right. You're messing around with Mother Nature. Right.
So basically what it goes on to say, the article is, this gain of function testing, whether a virus escapes a laboratory setting accidentally or on purpose, is really, really bad stuff, obviously, right? And what we're failing to see is these viruses that have been amplified and tampered with can be exploited for military purposes.
Scary.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's look at it this way, Bravo. Let's look at it this way for everybody out there. Now, this virus, by math, right, was about 0.2% fatal, right, or 0.02%, right? Somewhere, 0.02% fatal.
Correct.
Can anybody out there even conceive of a virus that is 14, 15, 20% lethal?
I think they call it a global killer.
I think that's what's called an extinction level event. Okay. Now, let's set that aside for a quick second. And these people all got together, right? And the Lancet was behind setting the narrative around it, according to the article. These folks were involved with building they're involved with gain of function testing. This is what these people do. Okay. The article goes on to claim that Daszak, when he learned the virus was causing a global problem, he moved quickly to line up a group of virologists to declare, without any persuasive evidence whatsoever, that COVID-19 that had a natural origin. Okay. It's a little puzzling why prominent guys who have PhDs and doctorates would risk their names behind a falsehood, right? Why would they do that? Why?
Unless they have a alternative motive, or they need to cover themselves, or they have other malicious intent.
Yes, but I think the answer could be a little simpler, Bravo. You're absolutely correct, but I think the answer is very simple. Remember, in the last episode of the Signal 50 podcast, we talked a little bit about how the government flows money on contract for research and development, right?
The kismet.
Keep it simple. Occam's razor. What's the oldest, easiest, simplest reason in the world? It's money.
Money. Yeah.
Okay, so Daszak and institutions like the EcoHealth Alliance, they receive large amounts of government funding, okay? And what they do is they package the money into subgrants that are dispersed among researchers and research institutions around the country and even around the world. Do you remember when we were talking about a prime contractor signs a subcontract and flows money on the subcontract? The subcontractors can have a subcontractor to execute the work. So
Yep.
it's money laundering operation all the way down, which is incredibly difficult to keep track of and to track,
Mhm.
and the money just disappears. And what the government is concerned about is an end product when they get back, and progress reports. Okay, the deliverables are
Mhm.
reports.
That's
Okay.
it. You just write a report and say things are going swell, and that's all they care about.
Yep. Swimmingly,
Wow.
everything is wonderful. We killed the ferrets. It's awesome. Okay, so. So consequently here, you've got a large group of scientists. They're quite honestly in Dasek's back pocket.
Mm.
They have a financial interest in what he wants, and they have a stake in camouflaging the possibility that the type of work that they're engaged in caused a global pandemic with millions of deaths and untold ruin financially around the world. Okay. So the article goes on to say that Dasek, he organized a Lancet statement. He did it with the intention of concealing his role and creating the impression of scientific immunity. Okay. So he used it as a shield. Right.
Someone needs to go to jail.
Well, it's very interesting. It's very dirty. It's very horrible.
Yeah.
This if this stuff in this article is, it's all plausible. Okay.
Mhm.
But if this is true, it is just, it's devastating. So the people
I'm sorry. You know how long it's going to take the scientific community to get their reputation back after this nonsense? And the whole money, the way money comes down from the NIH and the all the funding that, that's how they fund these projects, these scientific projects. And if you get your funding cut off, you're done. So you want it, it turns into you give us the science that we want to see. And the minute that it doesn't fulfill that scientific premise that someone wants, then your money's cut off. That's really what's happening.
Well, it's even worse than that.
Oh.
You have to remember that everybody that signed the letter in the Lancet that Facebook and YouTube and Twitter used to shadow ban and edit everybody, and the narrative that was set, the 6 of the guys that signed the letter either worked at or received funding from the EcoHealth Alliance, okay, according to Vanity Fair, okay, according to the article. So it's really bad stuff. Not only did all the social media platforms run with it to try to put that narrative out there to quash, what people were saying, that, this was created in a lab and it got out, et cetera, et cetera. They also used it to shut down an ongoing State Department investigation begun late in the Trump era, spearheaded by Mike Pompeo, into the true origins of the virus. And to make matters worse, the shutdown was actively promoted by U.S. government agencies and unelected bureaucrats who had no intention of revealing their own role in sponsoring and subsidizing highly dangerous gain-of-function research.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well,
so
there's always a backstory somewhere.
Right. So this is an opinion piece written by Dinesh D'Souza that's basically summarizing the Vanity Fair article. This was the easiest way for me or us to go ahead and relate this information to people. This stuff is coming out quickly in relative comparison. It's turned from a drip to the faucet is broken and things are really running, and people are just trying to scramble to get ahead of it at this point. So there's a lot going on. So I don't know. So that brings us to the next our next discussion, and I'll let you run with this one there, my friend.
Sure. So Alpha, the next part of this is we were talking about again. I heard story. I heard a story that There were no bats or anything that was the specific species of bat that carried the COVID-19 virus, where then it kind of crossed over in this wet market where they made soup and they did all this other stuff. There was no bats within 200 miles. And that was brought up as a conspiracy theory. And everyone was nuts for even thinking it. Well, in the story written by Lily Zhou, excuse me, Chou. Let me give her credit where credit's due. She, in the June 8th, 2021, basically, they say that neither bats nor pangolins, excuse me, were being sold in the wet markets in Wuhan when the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, virus pandemic started. A study by the Oxford University found Chinese officials have claimed the virus, which causes COVID-19, originated outside the country, but it was widely believed to have come from a top-level laboratory in Wuhan, where the initial cases were detected, or from a seafood market near the lab. So again, there's the story, and then a story that's being told to everyone to take the spotlight off of what's going on, to cover their tracks, whether it was a purposeful release or an accidental release. Alpha and I can't tell you that. We don't know one way or the other. But the way this virus was developed, and it has a specific DNA sequence. This comes from a hat tip to Dan Bongino. Talks about the sequencing of base pairs, and DNA is basically base pair chemicals that sit next to each other, and RNA comes by, peels off, and gives the message to the cell to do what it needs to do. Viruses are basically little DNA, they take over the mechanism of a cell and cause disease. We'll keep it simple. I get it. Dan Bongino was talking about the fact that there was a replicated pair that has never been seen in nature before. This sequencing of DNA repeated itself, which, according to experts, never happens. Now, going back to the story here, the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom, I butchered the name, sorry, Ghebreyesus, said in March that the organization hadn't found the source of the virus. So now you have the WHO saying, we don't know where this thing came from. Right. And the report they produced, which was said the virus very likely had an animal host, right, didn't adequately analyze other theories. So no one knows what one person is saying versus the other. So they're all, the story's starting to fall apart back then. The problem is everyone is looking for answers and wants answers. And then you have the social media forums wiping off anything that has anything to do with any idea at all besides what's sanctioned to be said. You have the government that is trying to cover certain people in the government that want to cover their tracks and causing subterfuge and camouflage. And the next thing you know, you got different organizations, and then everyone's worrying about catching this thing and having to wind up in the hospital, which was the worst place to be in the first place.
Well, let me ask you a question, Bravo.
Sure.
You're kind of a smart guy. I
sometimes.
And sometimes I'm sometimes okay. How is it now? Just go on a little journey with me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How is it that like a week after this was discovered, there was a vaccine?
That was something we talked about again, where miraculously the Chinese, again, we were saying this, and people were, we can't tell you who we are. We'll get canceled. No one knows we do this as what we normally have a conversation about current events anyway. But when we were talking about this before, I found it very odd that the Chinese already sequenced this virus the COVID-19 virus. They sequenced it, had it down to its DNA pairs within weeks of the release.
Right.
And we all were hearing also, just as a quick side note, everyone was dropping dead in Wuhan, where cell phone signals were not being, millions were gone and were being, not being used all of a sudden. But again, no one was paying attention to that. They were paying attention to whatever shiny object was presented for all of us to look at. Hopefully that answers your question, Alpha. I think that.
Well, it does, but you got to remember that you've got a company out there called Moderna, right? They have never successfully brought a product to market, and all of a sudden, boom, we have a vaccine within weeks.
Surprise.
Interesting.
And where did that come from? And I was actually questioning, Alpha, when this was coming out. Should we be trusting the Chinese when I thought it was coming out of, it wasn't coming from any wet market because the bat was nowhere to be found. And all of a sudden they're handing over the DNA sequencing for a novel Corona-19 virus? How does that happen? Someone answer that question for me.
Really, really interesting, isn't it? How quickly they sequenced that and they distilled a vaccine down. That's just very, 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 very interesting. So I have no idea. Again,
we're not saying it now. Other people are saying it. We were surmising it. Now other people are confirming what we were surmising.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's just really crazy, and
it's scary.
The more that comes, it's absolutely terrifying. Like I said earlier in this broadcast, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. If this was a trial balloon to see what they could get away with, see what could be gotten away with, I would have to say that they ran a hell of a successful beta test. Okay. And if anybody out there isn't paying attention, you should be paying attention. This was 0.02% fatal. Can you imagine? The chaos and pandemonium of a virus that's 1%, 5%, 15%, 20% fatal. Just wrap your head around that.
And if you really need a reminder, watch Contagion or watch Outbreak.
And scary stuff. Now that when you put it in the context of the real world, where we have, something that has actually happened like this, a global pandemic in modern times, how terrifying could that be? Anyhow, look, we can go on about this all night long, but here the simple fact of the matter is this. Something happened. This virus is not a naturally occurring virus, to the best information that I've seen. And a lot of scientists are coming out and saying this kind of sequencing does not happen in nature. This is not a zoonotic. For anybody out there who doesn't understand what the term zoonotic means, zoonotic, think zoo, right? Think animals in the zoo. Zoonotic, zoonosis, zoonotic transmission is from animal to human, right?
Yep.
If anybody believes that, I have a bridge I can sell you. I'm not sure that's the case. Time is going to tell, and I hope the truth does come out about this one day. But, what would the consequences of the truth really be? Which is the scary part, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to see. Anyhow. So, we spend a lot of time here at the Signal 50 podcast. We spend a lot of time talking about the current events that are going on, and we talk a lot about coronavirus because, there's a lot to talk about. And this is a rapidly evolving story with Tom Clancy couldn't write this crap any better.
Right.
I mean,
Not
this
to
is
mention
just.
the fact- Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, fine. Go ahead.
Not to mention the fact, Alpha, that if you wanted to get the truth out there, normally people would go to the news, CNN, MSNBC, but they're all fake. They're not doing what they should be doing, that the Constitution protects the press to do. And that is to keep tabs on what the government's doing and to report that to the having a free press. Our founders knew was the most important thing to have so that tyranny would not occur. The moment the free press decided that they're going to jump on board and carry the water for a tyrannical government, and I'm not talking about the last administration, I'm talking about this administration right now, and players that were in the last administration that had nothing to do with President Trump, but people that had their own agendas. They were in cahoots with the press and social media, and everyone was gaslit, in my humble opinion.
It was a constant campaign, and it seems to be a constant campaign, that anything that the last administration tried to do was, it's just more of the same. It's racist, it's homophobic, it's misogynistic, it's sexist, it's identity politics game being played at a high level of magnitude. And you also had, and this leads nicely into the next story, you also have a culture where your feelings matter more than facts. And everything was about hating Donald Trump. The story that we talked about, where, have we gotten there yet? Let me see. No, we haven't gotten there yet. It's about that very thing, the hydroxychloroquine drama, right?
Drama is a
Trump,
really good word.
Well, it's drama. The Trump administration came on, Trump, and he was being advised by people saying hydroxychloroquine is a very safe, viable treatment with azithromycin for coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can manipulate studies to do anything you want. And the article that we're posting is from the Epoch Times, obviously. And you can slant data, medical studies, any way you want them to slant, and you can take extreme cases from here and there. But all in all, before a lot of editorial comment, hydroxychloroquine in the right dose with azithromycin seemed to be very promising for people on forced ventilation, and it increased their survival rate by 200%.
Isn't it amazing?
Yes.
Isn't it amazing? This study right here was suppressed, was not allowed to be put out there. How many people had to die because this was suppressed? They had doctors that were lined up talking about how hydrochloroquine worked. France had 6,000 subject study that it worked. And meanwhile, you had the Lancet coming out with a bunch of nonsense talking about how hydrochloroquine is dangerous and people will die. And you have the lamestream media, MSNBC and CNN and all those morons parroting the fact that it's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous.
Well, because Donald Trump said it, and Donald Trump is dangerous. So, yes, he is dangerous. He's absolutely dangerous to your narrative. He was absolutely dangerous to the establishment in Washington, D.C., and they had to get rid of him at any cost.
Because he was ruining the whole big plan to take over the world.
And I got news for you. The man, he might have tweeted mean things, but he was right more than he was wrong.
That's right.
And hydroxychloroquine, I'm not a doctor. I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express. But from what I've read and some of the peer-reviewed studies that are out there, it is a truly effective, safe medication given in the right doses in concert with azithromycin Z-Pack, a cheap $10 Z-Pack, could potentially have saved tens of thousands of lives. Instead, it got politicized, and the president got blasted because the only thing that the media cared about was the propaganda machine to get rid of Donald Trump.
And the Lancet that was bashing hydroxychloroquine specifically was in the study that they touted. They put together this study very quickly, and guess what? They gave higher doses than normally administered to patients of hydroxychloroquine, which was then giving people dysrhythmias, which is like heart rhythms that were doing the wrong things for the heart to beat properly. And then they were touting that as being the problem with hydroxychloroquine and why it shouldn't be used. In the meantime, hydroxychloroquine has been around 60 years. It's used for all kinds of inflammatory processes, which COVID-19 is associated with with inflammatory processes. And once you know it, this article talks about how hydroxychloroquine is actually exonerated, vindicated to be the right medication for the job.
And dirt cheap.
And you don't have to make a vaccine if you got a treatment.
That's right.
And you see where this is connecting to, everybody? If you got a treatment, you don't need a vaccine. You're not going to be getting billions of dollars to make a vaccine.
That's right. Follow the money. Follow the money.
Yep.
But it's amazing how politics played a role in medicine and treating people on a mass scale, and how many people did suffer and pass away from complications related to this virus. And it's not a joke. COVID-19 is it's not a joke. We never thought it was a joke. It's a thing, and it's a very serious thing, and it does exploit people with predispositions for exploitation. And all we had to do was just treat everybody with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin that got it, and how many lives could have been saved. Instead, it was politicized, and they beat Trump over the head with it and all of his people that were for it. And the mainstream media turned on the propaganda machine and just clubbed him like a harbor seal. And it's disgusting. It's just absolutely disgusting. The media has failed.
It continues to fail.
They're a disgrace.
Yep.
They're an absolute disgrace. Disgrace. They should be ashamed of themselves.
And for everyone out there that subscribes to whatever narrative you want to put out there because it doesn't match with your own, really take a long, hard look at what it is to learn and to understand how we can all learn from each other if we just stopped and listened and kept our mouth shut and get the pride and the politics out of the way and just say, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's go try that and see if we can make this work. That is what happened.
I'll go one further. When I was raised and when you were raised, I know that both of us were raised with a healthy dose of skepticism. Our generation, we are known for questioning authority and not necessarily going along with the crowd. Okay?
Oh, very much so.
What did your teachers drill into your head? Why did you do that? Well, Johnny did it. If Johnny jumped off a bridge, would you follow him? We have too many people jumping off the bridge with Johnny. There's a theory that some people have seen it and it was made popular in a movie, but it's actually a thing. It's called the 10th man theory. Okay. 9 people in a room can have one opinion. The 10th man is going to have a different opinion always.
Yep.
And you have to listen to the 10th man. Everybody should be listening to the 10th man. that 10th man could be the little voice in your head saying, wait a minute, does this make any sense to me?
Mm.
We have lost our skepticism. We have fallen prey to propaganda, false narratives, and a propaganda-laden media in this country that all they do is lie. And I don't understand why they're doing it.
Mm. Power control.
I understand that, but we have to understand what's behind that. And I don't think we're quite there yet. We have some theories about it. But you know what? Let's move on to our next story, our last story of the evening that we want to cover. So, cancel culture and such, and using feelings to dictate logic, where words have different meanings and people can say whatever they want. They can be whatever they want. You can identify as whatever you want. You can have your pronouns. You can have this, that, and the other thing. That's fine. If you're a grown adult, fine. In Loudoun County, Virginia, there's a teacher. He's a gym teacher in an elementary school in the public school district of Loudoun County School District. His name is Tanner Cross. Now, Tanner is a devout Christian. He's got very, very strong beliefs. And he made the mistake of standing up in a private capacity as a private citizen, not in his teaching capacity, to push back against the school district wanting to allow children or forcing teachers to address children, elementary school children, by their chosen pronouns, and to embrace transgenderism in children. And Tanner Cross got up and said, this is ridiculous, in a public forum in front of the school board. He said, I'm speaking as a father, as a parent. I find this to be completely insane. This doesn't make any sense. These are children. Now, the Loudoun County School District took umbrage to this, right? Mm. And they suspended Tanner. Suspended him. Mm. Now, he engaged a handy little group, right, called the ADF, the Alliance for Defending Freedom. They're a nonprofit, pro bono legal firm that have successfully argued a number of different cases along these same lines in front of the Supreme Court. So they took on his case. They're a handy group to have around, don't you think, Bravo?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, indeed. They argued in front of a judge on Tanner's behalf in the northern part of Virginia to have Tanner Cross reinstated as a teacher with no penalty. And guess what? They were 100%. They were 100% successful. Mm. The judge said, "Yeah, you can't penalize somebody for speaking in a private capacity, giving his opinion. You cannot restrict somebody's freedom of speech. You cannot restrict somebody's freedom of expression. You can't do that." They had to reinstate Tanner immediately without delay, which they did. And essentially, the defense goes a little something like this. Even as a teacher, you are entitled to your First Amendment rights, as long as you are not acting in your capacity, right? And you are not stripped of your beliefs just because you are an education professional. So that's something for everybody to keep in mind out there, right? If anybody wants to make a donation to somebody who believes in free speech and in your freedom to express yourself, as long as you're professional, separating your life from another life, maybe, or your private life. I'd say if the Alliance for Defending Freedoms, the ADF, they take donations, I'm going to send them a check. They might be handy to keep around.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's our little bit on the cancel culture. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're going to keep the show to about 45 minutes. We really do appreciate you joining us this evening. We're going to come at you again. We're going to have another show maybe Friday night, and we hope to hear from you then. We'd like to throw a shout out to our affiliate, POF USA, POF-USA.com, makers of the finest AR-15 style rifles anywhere in the United States. Go ahead, go to their website, POF-USA.com. Guns are becoming more available on the market now. The demand is starting to wane a little bit, so the stocks are coming up and ammunition's becoming available too on the market. Also, Mark's Guns LLC, marksgunsllc.com. Look them up. They're up in Minnesota for all your firearms needs. They can do a cash transaction or a credit card transaction, ship it to your FFL, anything that you want. They'll get it out to you that way. A good bunch of guys there at Mark's Guns LLC. And we'd like to thank our soldiers, sailors, and airmen for protecting us 24/7, 365, and our police, firefighters, and EMS workers that are out there on the streets protecting us all the time. Be sure to catch us on Rumble and watch out for our Parler announcements. Parler's kind of a little weird these days. And make sure to catch us on your favorite podcast app. We're pretty much everywhere at this point. So,
correct. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to cue the music.
Cue the music, and everybody enjoy the rest of your week. We're on tomorrow is Friday Eve.
The weekend's coming. Sooner than later.
Coming. Bravo. Cue the music. Let's get out of here.
Take care. Again, thanks for listening. This is the end of our Signal 50 transmission.